As the old saying goes, every masterpiece has its very cheap copy. Turning Red is one of those weird current year classics that fit under the rather disturbing current year category of kids media made for adults. Media that has all the same energy, bright colors, and lightheartedness of a movie made for children, but a larger emphasis on adult elements and a noticeable hostility towards childhood innocence. And speaking of things beloved by Twitter psychos, the major flaw of Turning Red is the utter lack of meaningful conflict. Or, more to the point, Turning Red has the kind of soft, easy resolvable conflict one might see in a children's show, and lacks the pressing conflict of more mature storytelling. In other words, while there is conflict, most of it lacks heavy consequences, like playing a video game on easy mode. On the surface, Turning Red seems like another coming-of-age movie where the main character deals with relationships, the threat of severe humiliation, and facing the crushing pressure of social expectation. You know, having the perfect birthday party like in 16 Candles, passing the big test like in Stand and Deliver, or winning the big game like in Mighty Ducks. Both the official trailer and the movie's premise set up the movie as a coming-of-age tale where Mei struggles with fitting in as she turns into a giant red panda, and then struggling with the temptation as she learns the transformation also grants her significant power in that she can use that power to both take revenge on her bullies and rebel against her parents, setting up Mei's arc towards maturity and balance. The old story where the young main character encounters a huge change, which could include anything from relationships to bodily change, to experiencing a new town, to exaggerated magical conundrum. But not only does Turning Red fail at everything it promised, the movie didn't even have the decency to be a harmless cinematic nightmare, where at least they don't instill harmful lessons on the children. Instead, it changed the traditional coming-of-age arc, which is a young protagonist learning to grow past their flaws, and exchanged it for no character arc and lessons forged from terminal narcissism. Here's what I mean. Traditionally, movies like Turning Red focus on a character encountering a coming-of-age style problem, and then overcoming through lessons learned via maturity of character. However, the rampant narcissism of the snowflake generation is so prevalent in the movie, I would argue that Mei isn't even the main character. The mother is. If we take Turning Red's official trailer as the promised premise of the movie, we're given the setup for a mechanically decent arc. After all, major concerns at this age revolve around making friends, getting good grades, self-confidence, and impressing one's parents. Mei has friends, she's an A student, has tons of self-confidence, and exceeds all expectations handed down by her parents. To quote Mei from the movie, "I accept and embrace all labels." So, why did I call this a promising arc? Because, while the misfit who eventually earns a place in society is a great story arc, Mei's proposed story arc would have been the opposite. The girl who has everything and then suddenly has it all taken away when she goes through what the director called magical puberty. You know, kind of like The 13th Year, a Disney movie where a kid named Cody Griffin turns 13 and starts turning into a mermaid, or merman I suppose. In fact, the story of Cody Griffin mirrors Mei's story quite a bit. And just like his whole world was shattered when his mermaid traits started popping up, Mei's world would also shatter when she starts turning red. She has to learn self-control to control the transformation. She faces the temptation to abuse her panda powers and then presumably faces consequences, learns from her mistakes, and begins to overcome her flaws. Oddly enough, this is something Cody Griffin endures as well. Overall, a promising arc where the character who succeeds at every one of her goals is given a much larger obstacle, which challenges them on a deep character level, revealing her deep character flaws. The result being that Mei would confront her flaws, overcome them, and end as a better, more mature person. A nice little story with wholesome lessons and values. But there's the problem, the central issue that has infected so much of modern media: flaws. Or more to the point, a severe lack of flaws. While Cody suffers for his pride and arrogance, the so-called lessons learned in Turning Red are notably different. I think Jordan Peterson highlights this particularly toxic attitude fairly well with the following story. I remember one time I was trying to teach a particularly stubborn student about how to write, and she had written a number of essays in university and got universally walloped for them. And the reason for that is because she couldn't write. And so I was sitting down with her trying to explain to her what she was doing wrong. At one point she said, "I can write perfectly well. University professors just don't like my style." And I thought, what the hell's with you? You can't even write and you think you have a style. Instead of humbling herself, she was proud of her insufficiency. Starting to sound familiar? Or if for some reason you don't like Jordan Peterson, here's a quote by Darius Kincaid from Hitman's Bodyguard. You know, women don't like to be forgiven for shit, because that implies they did some shit to begin with. Flaws are the unfortunate reality that the snowflake generation simply cannot accept. Especially because it takes maturity to acknowledge and improve on one's flaws. In fact, this is a major point of the classic hero's journey. A hero's final exam usually happens here at the temptation portion. Because if they fail this, they tend to become villains. And we're not talking about those quirky Twitter flaws that don't actually matter, but the humiliating, destructive kind. Everyone has those. Unfortunately, when it comes to the snowflake category of media, it's not that their characters are necessarily flawless. It's far worse than that. They often take pride in their insufficiencies, and their flaws are often written as virtues. The trailer hints at a Mei who's secretly afraid, who doesn't work hard to fulfill some life goal, but so she doesn't lose what she has. The love of her friends, respect from her peers, the pride of her parents. Turning into the red panda should force Mei to confront her inner demons. Ideally, we would end with a stronger Mei motivated by ambition, but that isn't what we got. Because that requires Mei, the creator's precious little stand-in, to be wrong. Flaws are only flaws if the character faces serious consequences, meaning the character actually has to legitimately be at fault, not merely paying for the actions of others. And this is where Turning Red goes horribly wrong. At least, if Mei is supposed to be the main character. But so far I've just been chastising the story. What's it actually about? Well, to quote the main character, I'm Mei Lin Lee, and ever since I turned 13, I've been doing my own thing, making my own moves 24/7, 365. I wear what I want, say what I want, and I will not hesitate to do a spontaneous cartwheel if I feel so moved. Mei begins the movie as a star student and the perfect daughter. She has friends, she's super confident and doesn't care what anyone thinks. I accept and embrace all labels. She also helps her parents, mainly her mom, maintain the family temple and give tours after school. Everything is perfect, until the main conflict rears its ugly head. And no, it isn't the panda thing. It's Mei's conflict with her mother. And no, it isn't me reading too much into the story. The movie outright tells you right at the start. The number one rule in my family? Honor your parents. They're the supreme beings who gave you life, who sweated and sacrificed so much to put a roof over your head, food on your plate, an epic amount of food. The least you can do in return is every single thing they ask. Of course, some people are like, be careful, honoring your parents sounds great, but if you take it too far, you might forget to honor yourself. Yeah. Pretty sure no one actually says this, except for maybe Mei's friends. So this isn't about Mei humbling herself or becoming a better person. This is the first major hint that the story has been corrupted by lethal levels of narcissism. The initial conflict erupts when Mei gets really horny. Yes, a preteen girl getting really horny is the inciting incident for a movie made for kids. Classic Disney, am I right? So, Mei starts sketching out muscular drawings of boys. Classic Disney. She doesn't really have a crush or anything. Mei is just horny. This is when Ming Mei's mother, finds the drawings and freaks out at the vile, untold degeneracy her innocent daughter depicted in her notebook. So, Ming drags Mei down to the Daisy Mart, where the boy she was drawing about works, and then yells at the unsuspecting boy and shows everyone Mei's embarrassing horny drawings. This is where we see Ming's major flaw, overprotective parenting, and this is where we see Mei's perfect world begin to shatter for the very first time. Also notice that the consequences Mei faces aren't due to her own wrongdoing, but her mother's flaw. Keep this in mind, it's a pretty important dynamic. That night, Mei has a crazy fever dream and then wakes up as a red panda. She freaks out and then calms herself down enough to turn human again. She goes to school, meets up with her friends, and tries to hold herself together long enough to make it through school. Everything proceeds as normal until Ming arrives at school to deliver an entire box of tampons. Because Ming thinks her daughter is experiencing her first period, once again publicly humiliating Mei. She turns back into a panda and runs home crying. But that doesn't mean she can't make a horny stop to lustfully gawk at the Daisy Mart boy, where she literally goes awooga. You know, just in case all the dads watching this with their daughters didn't feel awkward enough. Mei makes it home, she gets a girl power story about their ancestor who gained the magical ability to turn into a red panda from the gods, and the only way to control a transformation is to control one's emotion. So Mei stays home until she can control her emotions, which she couldn't do until her friends came by, sang a song, and instantly solved the problem. job. Remember when singing a song to solve all your issues was an absurd joke? I guess some people took that seriously. So, if you were watching to see Mei Mei struggle through her magical panda transformation until she learns to overcome a major character flaw, leading to a balanced mind and control over the panda, you'd be disappointed. The panda stops being a direct issue for Mei Mei about a quarter into the movie, almost like a minor distraction before we get right back into the real issue, Mei Mei's conflict with her mother. Remember that earlier line? Honoring your parents sounds great, but if you take it too far, well, you might forget to honor yourself. Mei Mei's ultimate fight isn't against herself, but her mother. So after Mei Mei masters her transformation, she asks to go to a Four Town concert. Ming, of course, goes crazy with parental zeal and forbids Mei Mei from going. And this causes Mei Mei to go rogue. My whole life I've been her perfect little Mei Mei. Temple duties, grades. We've been so good. If they don't trust us anyway, then what's the point? Tired of being perfect, Mei Mei decides to rebel. She, along with her friends, plan to earn the concert tickets themselves. And they do this by selling Mei Mei's panda. Panda merchandise, pictures with Mei Mei's panda, and panda rides. That's when she gets hired to perform at a birthday party, which will earn the remaining money she needs for the concert. Mei Mei gets discovered, Ming's overprotective parenting kicks in, and she blames her daughter's friends for pushing Mei Mei into the idea. And Mei sides with her mother and blames her friends. Next, Mei has to undergo a ritual that will seal away her panda powers. Unfortunately, the ritual day falls on the same day as the concert, which Mei Mei can't go to anyway. Mei Mei chooses to keep her panda powers and uses them to crash the concert, where she's instantly forgiven by her friends, and everything is great, until an enraged Ming shows up with her giant evil panda form. Mei Mei defeats her mother by twerking, Ming's panda is sealed away by her sisters and the boy band, and the main story ends with the mom learning a very important lesson. As Ming herself puts it, I see you, Mei Mei. You try to make everyone happy, but you're so hard on yourself, and if I taught you that, I'm sorry. So don't hold back for anyone. The farther you go, the prouder I'll be. Or to summarize with a quote from Mei Mei, my panda, my choice, mom. And the movie ends on this last line. We've all got an inner beast. We've all got a messy, loud, weird part of ourselves hidden away, and a lot of us never let it out. But I did, and she was proud of her insufficiency. Now that the dark deed of summarization has been completed, let's get into it, shall we? I'm back! Literature Angel, you're back again? That's right. And what could it possibly be this time? Let me guess. You're here to talk about NordVPN again, and its special exclusive deal if you just go to nordvpn.com/literaturedevil. Well, actually, and how NordVPN not only allows you to change your virtual location with one easy click to any of its thousands of servers across the world, letting you hide from those annoying nosy corporations, but also access streaming content not available in your country. Not at all. You see, fine. Maybe you're going to mention how NordLinks allows you the protections of a VPN while improving your connection speeds, allowing you to stream your movies and games securely, with none of that pesky bandwidth throttling. Well, if you just give me a moment, I can explain. I know. You want to grace us all with NordPass, which keeps all your passwords and important notes in one single encrypted vault, allowing you to stop using password 123 for everything, and upgrade to a big boy password. Actually, I quite like this one. I do too, actually, but that's besides the point. The real reason I'm here is because that's it. You're here to talk about NordLocker, aren't you? Nord what? Don't play dumb. You know perfectly well that NordLocker encrypts your files before uploading or backing up those files, all before syncing them with all of your devices and even uploading them to a cloud to access remotely. Are you quite finished? Aha, I know. You want to mention NordVPN's threat protection. Nord can scan files for malware while you download them, block malicious sites before you enter them, brush away intrusive ads before you encounter them, and stop trackers before you're bothered by them, all without needing to be connected to a VPN. If you just let me speak, I'm actually here because I probably won't be back for a while. Wait, you're leaving? For good this time? Oh, you know, an angel's job is never done. So I just wanted to stop by and wish you and everyone watching a very happy new year. And thank you, Litter, for letting me stay at your place while I was here on business. Sure thing. Now, don't forget to check out NordVPN/LiteratureDevil to get a huge discount off the 2-year plan with this exclusive deal. Try NordVPN risk-free thanks to their 30-day money-back guarantee. Now, with that said, I'll be off. Stay awesome, true believers! Gone with one easy click. Anyway. The movie tries its hardest to convince the viewer that this is all about Mei Mei learning to accept herself when it was really about the mother accepting Mei Mei, in the classic snowflake story structure of someone else being the one in the wrong. Other examples being Rey showing Luke Skywalker how wrong he's been, and Encanto ending with Mirabel Madrigal showing her grandmother how wrong she's been, both going very well with Turning Red, which ends with Mei Mei showing her mother how wrong she's been. Simply put, the snowflake generation has a taste for writing stories where the super cool self-insert characters show how how wrong the parental figures are, like spiteful teenagers. Oddly enough, another coming-of-age movie called Luca handled this scenario quite well. For example, Luca's parents are also overprotective, forbidding him from traveling to the surface world. However, while there's nothing wrong with Luca's natural curiosity, his parents are correct. Luca is a sea monster, and on the surface is a village known for hunting sea monsters. And furthermore, Luca's curiosity ultimately serves as his major flaw. It causes him to defy his family and run away, and Luca later turns on his best friend Alberto for being a sea monster, all to keep his chance at attending school and satisfying his curiosity. Luca's wanderlust pushed him to venture outside his home, but it also led him to several wrong decisions that threatened everything he cherished. Even his running away could be seen as Luca giving up his parents, something Alberto desperately wants. Luca's decisions push him to make amends with those he has wronged, and Luca isn't easily forgiven by Alberto for his betrayal like Mei is forgiven for hers. Luca earns redemption by entering a marathon, risking exposure as a sea monster and death at the hands of the villagers. Also, he could win money for a Vespa and reignite Alberto's dream of traveling the world. To summarize, Luca suffers actual consequences for actions that were solely his fault. Something the snowflake generation refuses to accept. They seem to be more concerned with vicariously living out a big-budget personal revenge fantasy rather than showing off a meaningful coming-of-age story. So, this leads us to another major flaw in Turning Red: consequences. Let's go over the three big events: the first conflict, Mei's betrayal, and the concert showdown. When Ming finds Mei's book of naughty drawings and humiliates her in front of everyone at the Daisy Mart, everyone, of course, laughs at her. This is every kid's worst nightmare. Usually, just having one's parents in the vicinity of one's classmates is bad enough. Takes on a whole new level of humiliation when that parent then goes and reveals your private horny fantasies to the target of those fantasies. Then follows the nightmare sparking her transformation. But what's the source of the nightmare? Why, social humiliation, of course. A common yet major concern for school-age characters. Even Daria, the patron saint of misfits, desired social validation from her classmates. The episode Through a Lens Darkly highlights this aspect quite well. Daria, who prides herself on walking a different road than her more mundane classmates, is convinced to switch out her big round glasses for contact lenses. Of course, not having large round glasses made Daria appear more attractive, and her fellow classmates were more accepting. Daria hated how much she enjoyed walking on that same road as her classmates. She hated how shallow it made her feel, but she loved the prospect of fitting in a little bit more. So, what am I getting at? And what exactly do I mean by consequences? Turning Red's trailer gave us a premise similar to Disney movies like 13th Year and Luck of the Irish, a coming-of-age tale where the star's student undergoes a magical change. Cody Griffin, an ace member of the swim team, turning into a merman, and Kyle Johnson, ace basketball player, turning into a leprechaun, and of course Mei, ace academic student, turning into a big red panda. Turning Red the movie, however, gave us the premise that obeying one's parents at the expense of one's own desires is an expense too far. To quote, "I am my own person, but that doesn't mean doing whatever I want. Like most adults, I have responsibilities. It's not all about me, you know. I do make my own moves, it's just that some of my moves are also hers." Keeping that in mind, what actually happened to Mei? Well, she was humiliated and suffered the brutal mockery of everyone at the Daisy Mart. Much of Turning Red's story has to do with social anxiety, or as the creator Domi Shi put it, "I think I pitched it as a girl going through magical puberty to the studio and hoping that they would bite, and they did." Puberty is a very awkward time for many growing girl or boy, and many of us can relate to seeing that awkwardness in Mei. And I mention this because puberty-related social conflicts and the challenge they present to Mei seem to be the movie's focus. So you would think the consequences would build until they became so overwhelming Mei is either crushed by embarrassment or overcomes these challenges. So after her humiliation, Mei awoke one morning from uneasy dreams to find herself transformed in her bed into a gigantic red panda. Strong emotion forces her to change. A nice build-up for a proposed narrative all about the emotional stress of puberty. Plus, it's a nice build-up for when she goes back to school and the entire student body is mocking her for the Daisy Mart incident. Because obviously the story would have spread and quickly became the story of the day. And the story did spread since her friends even bring it up. A perfect conflict to escalate Mei's new problem. If a dream can be shocking enough to change her into a panda, imagine the trouble she'd contend with, having to contend with an entire school of classmates ridiculing her over an intensely embarrassing embarrassing moment. But that doesn't happen. And what must be an absolute miracle, no one cares. Except for Tyler, who puts up posters about the incident. The posters, of course, do nothing. So we're given a cause without the effect. Like setting up a joke and never delivering the punchline. Having bypassed the inevitable humiliation, the main focus becomes Mei-Mei's forced robotic behavior as she attempts to suppress her emotion and prevent herself from changing. Since we're on the topic, anyone else notice that Ming knew about the red panda due to the tiny minuscule fact that every woman in her family has it? Yet that very morning when she noticed Mei-Mei freaking out, she just assumed it was a visit by Aunt Flo and not a sudden transformation into, as the creator put it, some wild, hairy, hormonal beast. Keep this point in mind, it'll be important later. In fact, the whole conflict ends with Ming trying to sneak into Mei-Mei's school just to give her sanitary pads, which then pushes Mei-Mei over the edge. She turns into a panda and runs terrified all the way home. She even gets seen by plenty of people and causes chaos around town, including a few minor car crashes and some destruction of private property, almost causing major injury to innocent bystanders. Does Mei-Mei get blowback for being seen by so many people? For causing car accidents and property damage? For even skipping school? Nope. While it's understandable that her parents wouldn't punish her, because it really wasn't her fault, you'd think there would be some significant blowback by police, or the city rising to high alert. Maybe Mei-Mei has to face some consequences from her teachers, or at the very least, maybe face rumors from her classmates raising the stakes of social ridicule and exclusion. You know, what the story was supposed to be about? While Mei-Mei does encounter challenges, none of them are a result of her own actions. To put it another way, the story has no problem forcing Mei-Mei to pay the bill for someone else's dinner, while always letting Mei-Mei have her own dinners for free. Mei-Mei's betrayal comes right after she's mastered her panda form, not by going through an entire movie and overcoming her flaws to mature into a stronger person, because she doesn't really have any flaws, which is actually central to the movie's overall message. So yes, Mei-Mei is a Mary Sue by design. Her friends stop by, sing her a song, and the panda problem is no longer a problem. After all, why have a character arc when you can just have a high-budget fanfiction about yourself? So here, Mei-Mei argues for the chance to attend the Four Town concert. Ming denies her request, so perfect little Mei-Mei finally goes rogue. Side note, keep this moment in mind too. It's here that we see the panda has become such a non-issue in Mei-Mei's life that she just decides to use her magical transformation to make money. And everyone is just cool with Mei-Mei turning into a giant red panda and throwing money at her. We learned that Mei-Mei's grades dropped during this time, but again, this was a result of her direct action, so there's never a moment where she has to face those consequences either. No letter sent to her parents, no threat being made to be held back a grade, nothing. In other words, Mei-Mei faces no consequences until Tyler's birthday party, when she attacks the kid for mocking her again. Mei-Mei's parents are called, and the scheme falls to pieces. Ming uncovers her daughter's underhanded activities and then blames Mei-Mei's friends for tricking her daughter into doing such a thing. And despite the whole plan being Mei-Mei's idea, she immediately betrays her friends, which you would think Mei-Mei had to pay consequences for. But if you think that, you haven't been paying attention. This part is especially notable because it's the closest Mei-Mei ever gets to receiving consequences for her actions, and the closest glimpse we get to her major flaw, which is having too much devotion to her mother. Mei-Mei isn't punished, not even grounded for her deception, attacking Tyler, or even her failing grades. In fact, her father finds a recording she made with her friends where they were secretly gathering money for the concert tickets, then actually encourages her to fight back and defy her mother just like Ming defied her mother when she wanted to marry a man Ming's mother disapproved of. She and your grandma had a terrible fight. Your grandma didn't approve of me, but you should have seen your mom. She was incredible. In summary, honor your mother less and follow your own desires more, punctuating the idea with this quote: "People have all kinds of sides to them, Mei, and some sides are messy. The point isn't to push the bad stuff away, it's to make room for it. Live with it." Which would be great if this movie was about Mei-Mei dealing with an underlying flaw that she couldn't conquer, requiring her to seal away the panda forever. But it isn't, because then things would be Mei-Mei's fault and she would need a flaw to begin with, and who wants that? Much better to blame mom. Which brings us to the concert showdown. Ming, her mother, and her sisters all demand Mei-Mei seal away her panda forever. However, Mei-Mei wants to keep the panda, and after the pep talk from her father, decides to run away and use her special panda powers to attend the concert anyway. This is where Mei-Mei finally confronts her friends after betraying them. And she really only gets any resistance at all from Miriam. To quote, "May, you threw us under the bus." To which May says, "I know and I'm sorry. I've been like obsessed with my mom's approval my whole life. I couldn't take losing it, but losing you guys feels even worse." So, after reiterating how much it sucks to honor one's parents, we learned that Miriam had been taking care of May's Tamagotchi thing, and then all is forgiven. It wasn't even May who made the positive action towards maintaining their friendship. It was Miriam, the wounded party. Turning red is just one big narcissistic wonderland, isn't it? I'm reminded of the Proud Family episode A Star is Scorned. Another Disney property, by the way. When Penny Proud and her friends start a singing group and get famous, but Penny rose to be the most popular, which then led her to betraying her friends and hogging all the glory. Penny eventually gets tired of all the fame and quits. All the fame and glory being nothing without her friends. Then she finds her friends and attempts to apologize. But, unfortunately for her, this was during a time when Disney actually knew how to write a story, and her friends don't just instantly forgive her. In fact, they don't accept her apology until they learn that Penny truly surrendered all her fame and riches just to get them back. To summarize, both May and Penny betray their friends. But May only had to offer a mere apology, while Penny surrendered fame and fortune for the mere possibility at redemption, not its guarantee. To put this in the most triggering terms possible, real apologies for a truly terrible wrongdoing usually requires an act of contrition. Sorry is something you say when you bump into someone on the street. Repairing a broken friendship you ripped to pieces through horrific betrayal usually requires an act of contrition, an action displaying the truth of your remorse and the validity of your apology. Like when John Wick cut off his own finger in atonement to the High Table. So, May once again not only sidesteps the consequences of her actions, but character growth. And now we're left with May versus Ming. Ming was so angered by her daughter's disobedience, she changed into her own panda and gave chase. In a normal movie, this is where the protagonist comes to terms with their flaws and mistakes, matures, and faces their test like a final exam. Coming-of-age heroes are like incomplete puzzles, feeling awkward and missing pieces. The final conflict is when our hero completes the metaphorical puzzle, kind of like in the old movie Flight of Dragons, where Peter Dickinson spends most of the story being an awkward, useless nerd, until the very end, where he finally gets the confidence to literally destroy the evil wizard with facts and logic. As mentioned before, May's only flaw is being too good of a daughter. In fact, her not having a major flaw is the movie's whole point. Remember the whole, people have all kinds of sides to them, May, and some sides are messy? The point isn't to push the bad stuff away, it's to make room for it. Live with it. It's okay to have flaws. However, to have an accept your flaws lesson, May would need to have a flaw that leads her astray. They try to play the panda like this, as if the big red beast is a Mr. Hyde, pushing May to do terrible things, but it doesn't do that. Normal May is exactly the same as Panda May. If you recall, the entire struggle was not against some inner panda voice guiding May into temptation. The struggle was against actually turning into the panda due to emotional overload. And being a panda was only a problem because it was just awkward to be a panda, which stops being a problem by the time May is selling selfies for concert money. Turning red is supposed to be about turning into a panda, and the panda was supposed to personify the awkwardness of puberty. But May solves this problem very early on in the movie. So in other words, May completes her metaphorical puzzle by the middle of the film. When the character doesn't have any flaws because, quote, my whole life I've been her perfect little May, then the lesson stops being learn to live with your imperfections and becomes indulge in those imperfections. My panda, my choice, mom. In reality, May's only crime during the movie is defying her overbearing mother, which isn't really due to a flaw, but reasonable frustration that most people could sympathize with, like cheering for the rebels against a tyrannical empire. Flaw-driven consequences are closer to Penny's pride, driving her to momentarily choose fame over her friends, and then losing those friends. And to bring all these points together, normally this is where the hero battles the final conflict with their newfound virtue, having already faced and come to terms with their imperfection. May defeats her mom by twerking. I'm not your little May anymore. I lied, Mom. It was my idea to hustle the panda. My idea to go to Tyler's party. It was all me. I like boys. I like loud music. I like gyrating. I'm 13. Deal with it. I'm not really sure why so many current year female characters are intentionally written as vulgar and crass, or why the writers behind them champion these insufficiencies as virtues. But here it is, which is again very odd considering again that most coming-of-age stories carry the opposite message. That one may feel like an adult, and while they may have achieved some great things, they still have a lot of growing to do. Turning Red ends with Ming learning that turning 13 means Mei Mei is now an adult and should therefore allow her daughter to control her own life and get off her back, which almost makes sense due to Ming's aggressive helicopter parenting style. But the final message of the movie swings things way too far in the opposite direction. Like if your main character was a horrible drunk and the story's lesson ended up being about how the women who left him were too judgmental and the laws were too oppressive. That he likes alcohol and parties and loud music, he's 21, deal with it. In the end, Mei doesn't learn any important lesson, other than she should be allowed to indulge in crazy behavior without restraint or judgment, and the parents should just be okay with that. After all, her panda, her choice. Now, let's compare Mei's journey to the earlier examples of Cody Griffin from 13th Year and Kyle Johnson from Luck of the Irish, two other coming-of-age Disney movies where the main character undergoes magical transformation. Yes, turns out Dami Shi actually didn't invent the concept of magical puberty, but unfortunately for Cody and Kyle, they had the misfortune of being male and had to face those annoying consequences. Cody Griffin begins as the prideful star of the school swim team. This ends when he starts changing into a fish man. Turns out he was adopted and is actually the son of a mermaid. The twist? He starts changing when he touches water. Bad news for a guy whose entire self-worth is wrapped up in competitive swimming. Cody, of course, hides this condition, which puts him at odds with his girlfriend and actually making him realize how it feels to be an outcast. But pride comes before the fall, and rather than skipping the big swim competition, Cody sneaks out and attends anyway. He defies his parents and even goes through his loyal friend Jess Wheatley to do it. Cody's actions directly lead to catastrophe when he wins the competition, and ends up revealing his condition. His pride put everything at risk. Cody learns that he just can't forget about this part of his life, and there are things far more important than high school popularity and its swim team. Kyle Johnson is the crazy arrogant superstar of his high school basketball team. Why is he lazy? Because he has a magical coin that generates luck. He's not necessarily good at basketball, he just makes incredibly lucky shots. He even zones out during a test, guessing all the answers and gets them all correct. He's contrasted pretty well with Bonnie Lopez, who puts a lot of hard work into everything she does. Kyle never even questioned it. He simply attributed everything to just being awesome. So, of course, his whole world is shaken when he loses the coin, and along with it, loses the luck. This is when the magical changes start setting in. Kyle and his mom both start becoming more leprechaun-like. Red hair, Kyle gets shorter and sprouts pointy ears, etc. Kyle must come to terms with no longer being a Mary Sue and actually has to work for things. Turns out, Kyle's mother was Irish and hailed from a family of leprechauns. The coin, of course, was stolen by a rival family of leprechauns, so the final showdown revolves around Kyle putting his luck and freedom on the line by making a magical bet with the evil leprechaun. Kyle ends the movie humbled and with a new appreciation for the hard work Bonnie Lopez puts into everything, where before, Kyle merely mocked her. Cody and Kyle both had flaws, made mistakes, faced the consequences, and learned something new by the end, changing them as characters. Mei Mei doesn't have this arc, but you know who does. Her mother, Ming. Here is where I'd normally try my hand at fixing this blatant exercise of unapologetic narcissism, but the best change would be switching the focus to Ming. Penny Proud's pride drove her friends away. Cody Griffin's pride placed his whole family at risk. Kyle Johnson's pride led him to mock hard workers like Bonnie Lopez, dismiss important aspects of his life, and assume his greatness came from just being awesome rather than just being lucky. And Ming's pride pushed her own daughter to rebellion. Remember when I mentioned that Mei seems to be paying the bills for dinners she never ate, i.e. facing the consequences for the actions of others, turning into a big red magical panda probably being the most prominent, and remember Mei never had to face her flaws because she doesn't have any. As a reminder, I'll refer back to the earlier Daria example. Daria placed a lot of pride in nonconformity in most things, but most notably in nonconformity when it came to one's physical appearance. This is a principle she holds throughout the entire series. So, when she finds herself betraying this principle, after switching to contact lenses and enjoying the newly found positive attention from her teachers and classmates, she becomes angry with herself, her self-image of a nonconformist shattered by vanity. This is the formula for internal conflict, the struggle of a character when they begin betraying their own morals. Mei's only identifiable principle is honoring her parents over her own wants, even hanging out with her friends, sometimes. Thing is, they're her friends. She'll see them the next day. Not really a big sacrifice. So the first true test of any resolve is the Four Town concert, and where Daria was so stressed at the betrayal of her own principles that she locked herself in the school bathroom, and then decided to reject both the lenses and the glasses, effectively choosing to go through her school day with dangerously blurry vision. Mei gleefully turns against her mother's wishes without a second thought. In fact, she has so so much fun that her father later uses that fun as a reason to keep rebelling. No internal struggle or guilt until, of course, she got caught. A perfect setup for a movie dedicated to painting selfishness as a virtue. Now, let's look at Ming. Ming has several good qualities. She's attentive, works hard, seems to be the family breadwinner, and loves her husband enough to literally fight her own mother for the right to marry the guy. She even makes regular bonding time for May. But just like John Wick's wrath pushed him to start a war against the Russian mob, forever shattering the very peace he coveted, Ming's affection for May would eventually cause everything she feared, creating a rift between herself and her daughter. It begins with that very first conflict, when Ming finds May's book of erotic fantasy and chooses to blame the Daisy Mart worker rather than listen to May, because Ming just couldn't comprehend that her perfect little daughter would ever do such a thing without being pushed. So, of course, Ming does what any empowered Western woman would do and blames the man. Just like a man taking the blame for a woman's work, am I right? May was humiliated, and it's probably no coincidence that her panda problem started that night. And speaking of, why didn't Ming warn May about the family blessing? Suddenly turning into a big red panda might be something you'd want to mention. To quote Ming, "I thought I had more time, you're just a child. I thought if I watched you like a hawk, I'd see the signs and be able to prepare," which emphasizes Ming's major flaw. First, Ming along with her mother and sisters have all gone through the same change. So if Ming was looking for signs, it probably means there are usually some to look for, which then implies that May might have skipped them. Perhaps May's catastrophic public humiliation triggered the change early. But the truly telling phrase is, "You're just a child," which directly tells us that Ming still sees Mei Mei as a child. So it's also likely that Ming's need for Mei to remain her perfect little girl blinded her to the oncoming change. This outcome even fits the conflict of the movie. It's Ming who has the driving narrative flaw. It's Ming who must humble herself by the end. And it's Ming who overcomes her perfection and completes a character arc, learning to be less smothering in her parenting style. Turning Red was supposed to be about the awkwardness of puberty by personifying said puberty with a big red panda. The movie is actually about the conflict between Mei and her mother Ming as they clash over Mei attending a concert. In other words, in concept, Turning Red is a very shallow copy of the Goofy movie. Oh, you know, the movie that's actually about the conflict between Max and his father Goofy as they clash over Max attending a concert. They even have a nod to how much Max fears puberty and his body changing into a cartoonish monstrosity like his father. Except the Goofy movie had the decency to remember it was a kid's movie, and portray Max's attraction and his actions towards Roxanne far more romantically and far less horny than in Turning Red. Considering men are often demonized and referred to as pigs by the ferocious flocks of feral feminists for their considerable horniness levels, you'd think this would be the opposite. But here we are. Might I also point out that the conflict in the Goofy movie is a direct result of Max's actions. Goofy only gets involved because he doesn't want Max going down the wrong road in life, and he only forces Max on the road trip because Max got suspended for pulling a huge stunt at school, all to impress Roxanne. Max's stunt got him the date, but it also caused Goofy to worry about his son's bad life decisions. In comparison, May followed all the rules and obeyed every order ever given by her mother. She even mastered her magical panda transformation in record time. And yes, mastered. May was tested in everything. It was Ming's actions and her stubbornness alone that would eventually cause the rift between herself and May. I mean, what would have happened had May asked and Ming said yes? May and her friends would have probably just had a pleasant time. The story shifted its entire course based on Ming saying no. The entire conflict revolved around Ming's overprotective perfectionist nature, her flaw. And most importantly, Ming fails. She chastises everyone except for May rather than talking with her daughter about these new feelings, possibly ignoring the signs of the oncoming panda. She rejects May's reasonable request to attend a concert, and she fails to accept that May might want to keep the panda rather than steal it away. And she fails to such an extent, Ming becomes a big giant monster. Honestly, the movie's more of a Freudian freak show than a coming-of-age tale. The Goofy movie used their concert as a pivotal character moment for Max. Does he choose to trick his dad into driving to the concert, or does he put his own feelings aside and go along with Goofy's bonding journey? Max, of course, fails the test, choosing to lie to his father. Goofy, of course, knew Max intended to lie, but gave him the choice anyway. So, this sparks the final major confrontation between Max and Goofy. No more games, no more pretense. They both lay everything on the table. However, once everything's settled, Goofy happily helps Max attend the concert. You see, the concert in the Goofy movie and the journey towards it, aren't even Max's main goals. Sure, he likes Powerline, but the concert is ultimately a symbol. It stands for more than just a concert. If Max can reach the concert, he can reach Roxanne and win her heart, which is why the tension is so high. We can understand Goofy's desire to bond with his son and make sure Max isn't going down a bad road, while also coping with the idea of Max growing apart from him. But we can also understand why Max places so much desperation into attending the concert. His need goes beyond a shallow desire for the experience, or even personal status. Max not only wants to impress the girl he's been crushing on, but wants to prevent her from going with someone else, which was hinted at earlier. So Max's choice becomes going to the concert and impressing Roxanne, the girl he desperately likes, or respecting his father and losing Roxanne. A definitive choice to make. In Turning Red, the concert is just something May wants to attend. May and Ming already bond regularly, so the concert just happens to be the place where we have the final confrontation. In other words, May would lose nothing if they decided not to go. There's no boy she promised to meet there. This isn't Four Town's last concert, and they don't have a dying friend who they decide to break all the rules for, so the girls can forge one last happy memory together. They just selfishly want to go. The important part is May's willingness to attend the concert anyway, despite being told no. To summarize, the Goofy movie concert was packed with meaning and metaphor, while the Turning Red concert is just a cool concert. And if Goofy's exploring deeper topics and laying down heavier life lessons than your coming-of-age story, well then there might be something you've missed. I mean, all I could think about was that Mei should count herself lucky she isn't in Chihiro's shoes from Spirited Away. She'd end up losing all her friends and working in a supernatural bathhouse until she learned to respect her parents and appreciate how good she actually had it. Yet, to be fair, at least we can say Mei likes working hard and is a proud capitalist. After all, Mei lacks flaws, not virtues. And there's no greater virtue than being a capitalist, baby. However, if we really wanted Mei to suffer social exile, it's lucky she never had to spend a day in Lilo's life, the lonely girl who everyone hated for being the weird kid, who actually lost her parents, whose only friend was her older sister, Nani, and whose social salvation arrived in the form of a destructive alien monster. And even that odd little family was close to falling apart. Meanwhile, Mei is a star student with loving parents and a group of loyal friends, who will pretty much instantly forgive any sin she commits against them, but cries over a magical panda transformation that actually becomes a lucrative asset halfway through the film, and also she has an overbearing mother. But after looking at Max, Lilo, and Chihiro, all I could think of was, get some real problems, Mei. Overall, Turning Red is less of a deep exploration into social tension spawned by puberty, and more of a big-budget teenage tantrum, painted in bright colors and fueled by the purest of cringe. While there are some interesting ideas and concepts, the execution is shallow and lacking. It really feels like a fanfiction the creator was carrying around about how she was totally right and her mother was totally wrong. With the aversion to romance and the odd focus on Mei being overtly horny, really sets this movie closer to the new disturbing genre of kids movies made for adults. Like there's a whole gaggle of creators and possibly viewers who have grown up and now envy the relatively carefree life of a preteen. This is probably why the word adulting exists. A word which carries all the eye-rolling rebellious annoyance of having to be an adult for a few hours a day before you go back to being not an adult again. And so Turning Red feels like another installment in the ongoing corporate crusade against innocence. No more Max daydreaming about her romantic outing with Roxanne, now it's Mei and her friends overtly drooling over boys. But these movies, especially kids movies, aren't meant to reflect or even validate you. They're meant to entertain and ideally teach. They show us that dragons can be conquered, and coming-of-age tales show us that we're not alone. Everyone goes through what you're going through now at that age, and you don't necessarily have to be Superman to overcome these issues. But in any case, the narrative goal is to inspire the viewer toward positive change. Keep going, better yourself, and you can conquer that dragon. Turning Red tells you that you're actually perfect, and anyone telling you otherwise is a big mean monster needing to be conquered. My panda, my choice, mom. Turning Red isn't a movie that urges you to overcome your insufficiency, but to take pride in your insufficiency. Like if the story was about Mei getting into drugs, and the arc was about how the mother was a controlling psycho. Because Mei is now 13 and could do drugs if she wants, ending the story with the mother being okay with this horrendous lifestyle. I can tell you one thing, Goofy wouldn't have stood for Max going down that path. In the end, there are so many movies that cover every topic and idea Turning Red attempts to. But but with far more skill, far greater meaning, and far less narcissism. If you want a better story about magical puberty, Disney has a whole roster of them. If you want a story about a girl facing true social exile and gets punished to the point of losing everything, watch Lilo and Stitch. If you want a deep conflict between parent and kid, where both are at odds but both have valid concerns, watch the Goofy Movie. But if you want to watch a creator yell about their overattentive mother, check out First World Problems, the movie. Oh yeah, and something about 9/11.